Eli James had barely stepped off the alien transport when he realized he wasn't on Earth anymore. Towering crystalline spires jutted into a sky that shimmered with 3 suns, each a different hue. Around him, beings from a dozen different star systems bustled, each more exotic than the last. Some had sleek, insect-like exoskeletons. Others wore liquid metal suits that shifted and glimmered as they walked. It was a place of pure science fiction made real, and Eli was stuck smack in the middle of it. "Are you Eli James?" A deep, gravelly voice asked from his left. Turning, Eli faced a tall alien with dark, chitinous skin and glowing green eyes. The figure wore a sleek, segmented suit that flexed and moved as if it were alive. Behind him stood another human, tall and wiry, with sandy hair and an easy grin. "I am," Eli replied. "Who's asking?" "I'm Major Drent of the Xylox Imperial Guard," the alien said. He jerked a thumb at the grinning human. "This is Corporal Andrew Taylor. We've been assigned to orient you and get you settled before the first trial." "Trial?" Eli repeated, raising a brow. Andrew stepped forward, offering a hand. "Don't worry, mate. Think of it as a really intense job interview, with a bit of danger thrown in." Eli shook Andrew's hand, his grip firm but uncertain. "And what's the job?" Major Drent crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Queen Seraphina of the Zoltrax realm has declared a challenge. She seeks the finest warrior to serve as protector of the realm." Eli's gaze shifted to the sprawling city ahead of them. "Protector of the realm? That sounds big." Andrew laughed. "Big is right. Huge. You're competing against the best soldiers, hunters, and champions from across the galaxy. No pressure. I didn't sign up to compete in some intergalactic tournament," Eli said, frowning. Drent's mandibles clicked together, a sound Eli guessed was meant to express impatience. "Your name was drawn, and Earth agreed to send you. Refusal is not an option." Andrew clapped Eli on the shoulder. "You'll be fine, mate. Just stick with me and follow the Major's lead. We've got your back." Eli glanced between them. The alien Major's stern demeanor didn't exactly scream friendly, but Andrew's easygoing attitude was oddly reassuring. "What's the first step?" Drent gestured toward the city. "You'll report to the orientation center. There, you'll receive your uniform, basic equipment, and an overview of the trials. This isn't just about fighting. You'll be tested on your ability to adapt, to strategize, and to forge alliances." Eli nodded slowly, though his mind was still reeling. "All right, lead the way." As they walked through the bustling alien streets, Andrew filled him in. "You'll be paired up with different competitors in each round. Sometimes it's a team effort, sometimes solo. But watch your back. Not everyone plays fair." Drent shot Andrew a sharp look. "We do not expect sabotage. Competitors who break the rules are removed from contention." "Yeah, but you never know," Andrew muttered. "Better safe than sorry." Eli stayed quiet, taking it all in. The city was alive with energy. Hovering platforms carried goods and people. Vendors shouted in alien tongues, and glowing symbols floated in midair, displaying advertisements for everything from weaponry to some sort of glowing fruit. It was as overwhelming as it was fascinating. When they reached the orientation center, they were greeted by a holographic attendant that materialized out of thin air. Its voice was soothing but firm as it guided them through registration. Eli received a simple but sturdy uniform, a small device that translated alien languages directly into his ear, and a briefing packet that displayed holographic images of the challenges ahead. As they waited in line for final check-in, Andrew leaned in and whispered, "What's your story, mate?" "Back on Earth, just a soldier," Eli said with a shrug. "I've done a few tours, nothing crazy. This whole space tournament thing is way out of my league." Andrew chuckled. "Well, you're here now. Might as well make the best of it. Who knows? Maybe you'll surprise everyone." Drent, standing nearby, made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a scoff. "The human is not here by accident. The selection process is meticulous. If he was chosen, it is because he has potential." Andrew winked at Eli. "See? Even the Major thinks you've got a shot." Eli managed a half-smile. Great. No pressure. They spent the rest of the day moving through the orientation process, meeting a few of the other competitors. Aliens with scales that shimmered like rainbows, or beings who moved so gracefully they seemed to float. Eli felt like the odd man out, but Andrew's light-hearted comments and the Major's calm, steady presence kept him from feeling completely overwhelmed. By the time they reached their assigned quarters, Eli was exhausted but a little more comfortable with the idea of competing. As he lay on the strange, firm cot in his room, he couldn't help but think about what lay ahead. Trials, alliances, and a queen who wanted the perfect warrior. What had he gotten himself into? Chapter 2. The trials begin. Eli awoke to the soft chime of an automated alarm, the sound subtle yet insistent. A voice in his ear, broadcast by the translator device he'd been given, informed him that the first trial would begin in 30 minutes. Groaning, he sat up and stretched, the alien cot's firm surface doing no favors for his back. Andrew poked his head into the room, grinning as always. Morning sunshine. Ready to face the jungle? Eli frowned. What jungle? Andrew chuckled. Didn't you read the briefing packet? I fell asleep halfway through it, Eli admitted. Well, no worries. We're being dropped into one of Zoltrax's more interesting regions. The goal is simple. Survive and reach the extraction point. Should be a piece of cake. He tossed Eli a small pack. Gear up. You'll need it. As they left the quarters, Major Drent joined them, his tall, imposing frame drawing stares from others in the corridor. Human, Drent said, addressing Eli. Remember that the jungle trial is not just about survival. It's about demonstrating your ability to adapt. This is the first step in proving you're worthy of competing. I'll keep that in mind, Eli replied. You'll have to do better than that, Drent said, his green eyes glowing faintly. The Queen does not tolerate mediocrity. They made their way to the transport hub, where dozens of competitors were gathering. Eli saw creatures of all shapes and sizes, from the towering reptilian beast known as a Garvex to a delicate-looking alien with translucent skin that shimmered in the sunlight. The variety of life forms was staggering, and Eli felt a momentary pang of doubt. What chance did a single human stand against beings like these? Andrew nudged him. Don't look so nervous, mate. The trick is to take it one step at a time. Stick with me and we'll be fine. Eli forced a smile. Let's hope so. A holographic projection appeared before them, displaying a map of the trial zone. The terrain was dense and rugged, with sprawling trees, winding rivers, and a host of unknown dangers. The voice of the announcer explained the rules. Participants would be dropped at various points throughout the jungle and would need to navigate to a central location marked on the map. Along the way, they'd encounter challenges designed to test their endurance, problem-solving, and teamwork. Any questions? The announcer asked. Eli raised a hand. What happens if we don't make it to the extraction point? You're eliminated, the announcer said simply. Andrew leaned toward Eli. Don't let it get to you. Just keep moving forward. We'll figure it out. Soon after, they boarded a transport pod that whisked them away to the trial zone. As they descended into the jungle, Eli's nerves kicked into high gear. The trees looked impossibly tall, their branches forming a thick canopy that blocked most of the sunlight. The air was heavy with moisture, and unfamiliar sounds echoed through the dense foliage. As the pod hovered above the drop point, the doors slid open, and the announcer's voice came through once more. Good luck. Eli barely had time to brace himself before the floor beneath him gave way, and he was falling. He landed in a clearing, the impact softened by a cushioning field generated by the pod. Andrew landed beside him a moment later, rolling to his feet with practiced ease. Welcome to Zoltrax's finest jungle, Andrew said, scanning their surroundings. Beautiful, isn't it? Sure, Eli muttered, pulling his pack tighter. Let's just keep moving. They set off, the dense underbrush making progress slow. The jungle was alive with sounds. Chirps, growls, and the rustling of unseen creatures. It wasn't long before they encountered their first obstacle, a deep ravine spanned by a rickety bridge of vines. Think it's stable? Eli asked, eyeing the bridge warily. Andrew shrugged. Only one way to find out. He stepped onto the bridge, testing it with his weight. The vines creaked but held. Careful, Eli said, following closely. I'd rather not end up at the bottom of that ravine. Relax, Andrew said with a grin. Just focus on one step at a time. They made it across without incident and continued on. The next challenge came in the form of a river teeming with amphibious creatures that looked a little too interested in their presence. Drent, who had been traveling a short distance behind them, caught up and studied the scene. We need to get to the other side, Drent said, his tone as calm as ever. The current is strong, and those creatures may be aggressive. Andrew sighed. Guess we're swimming? No, Drent said, pointing to a series of boulders that jutted out of the water. We use those. Eli followed Drent's lead, leaping from boulder to boulder. The alien major moved with surprising grace, and Andrew kept pace easily. Eli managed to stay upright, but his heart raced as one of the creatures snapped at his heels. By the time they reached the far shore, he was out of breath. Not bad for a human, Drent said, a hint of approval in his voice. Eli glanced at Andrew. Is he always this encouraging? Andrew laughed. That's probably the closest thing to a compliment you'll get from him. They pressed on, navigating through dense vegetation, climbing steep slopes, and avoiding the local wildlife as best they could. Each challenge pushed Eli further out of his comfort zone, but he found himself relying more and more on Andrew's light-hearted guidance and Drent's quiet strength. Despite their differences, the three of them began to function as a team. As they approached the central location marked on their map, Eli felt a sense of relief. They weren't there yet, but they were making progress. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about proving they could face the unknown together. Almost there, Andrew said, pointing ahead. Just one last push. Eli nodded. Let's finish this. Chapter 3. An unexpected ally. Eli stretched out his stiff muscles and surveyed the clearing ahead. The trial's second phase had begun, and they had just finished constructing a temporary shelter in one of the safer zones. The sky overhead shifted from a vibrant orange to a deeper violet as dusk crept in. Andrew walked back from the edge of the clearing, carrying a bundle of dried plants that had passed Drent's rigorous inspection. Found some fire starter, Andrew said, dumping the bundle near the base of a makeshift fire pit they dug. Drent, you got that fancy alien igniter of yours? The major, ever stoic, stepped forward. Stand back, he said simply. His segmented armor shifted as he retrieved a small device from his belt. A moment later, a focused beam of light ignited the pile, and warm flames flickered to life. Not bad, Eli remarked. Where can I get one of those? Drent didn't answer, but Andrew gave a broad grin. You've got to join the Xylox Guard. I hear they've got a pretty rigorous induction process. Eli smirked. Hard pass. The three of them settled in around the fire, passing around ration packs that had been included in their gear. The conversation turned to the day's events, the obstacles they'd faced, the traps they'd avoided, and the wild creatures that had tried to make a meal of them. I have to hand it to you, Eli said, looking at Drent. You knew exactly where to step in that pit of quicksand. Drent tilted his head slightly, as if puzzled. It was simple observation. The consistency of the surface was different in that one spot. I'm surprised you didn't notice. Sure, Eli said with a shrug. I'll remember that next time we're running for our lives. Andrew chuckled. You've got to give him credit, Major. Eli here might be new to this whole intergalactic competition thing, but he's been holding his own. Drent's mandibles clicked together, which Eli was beginning to recognize as a sign of mild agreement. He shows promise. Promise, Eli repeated, pretending to be offended. I think you mean skill. Andrew laughed again. We'll call it whatever you want, mate. But you're here now, and that means something. Their banter was cut short by a rustling in the brush. Instantly, all three were on high alert. Drent stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the firelight. Andrew drew a compact weapon from his belt, its energy core humming softly. Eli reached for his utility knife, the only weapon he had. From the shadows emerged another competitor, her elegant armor gleaming under the dim light of the rising moons. She was tall and lean, her features sharp and regal. Her eyes, a luminous shade of silver, swept over them before settling on Eli. She held up her empty hands, a universal gesture of peace. "I mean no harm," she said, her voice melodic but steady. "I am Lyrina of the Seraphist Dominion. My team was scattered, and I seek allies." Eli glanced at Drent, whose expression was unreadable as always. "Is this allowed?" Eli asked quietly. "Competitors are permitted to form temporary alliances," Drent replied. "But we must tread carefully. Such arrangements often end in betrayal." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, we could use another pair of eyes. What do you think, Eli?" Eli studied Lyrina for a moment. She didn't seem hostile, but then again, appearances could be deceiving. Still, something about her presence felt different. Like she wasn't just here to win, but to survive. He made up his mind. "All right," he said. "You can stick with us, but no funny business." Lyrina inclined her head gracefully. "You have my word." They made room for her by the fire, and she shared her own rations with them, a gesture that helped break the initial tension. As the night wore on, the group began to exchange stories about their homes, their cultures, and the lives they'd led before the trial. Lyrina described her world, a place of crystalline cities and vast oceans teeming with bioluminescent creatures. She spoke of the challenges her people faced in maintaining a fragile peace among neighboring systems. Eli found himself listening intently, fascinated by the sheer variety of life and experience that existed beyond Earth. "What about you, Earthman?" Lyrina asked, her gaze fixed on Eli. "What drives you to be here, in this competition?" Eli hesitated. "Honestly, I didn't sign up for this. My name was drawn, and here I am. I'm not some chosen hero or anything like that. I'm just a guy trying to figure out how to survive long enough to get back home." Lyrina considered his words, then gave a small smile. "Sometimes the greatest journeys begin without choice. It is what we do with that journey that defines us." Andrew groaned. "Great. Now you're making him think too hard." Eli threw a small twig at Andrew, who dodged it easily. "Keep talking, and you'll be on firewood duty all night." Lyrina watched the exchange with amusement, and even Drent seemed slightly more relaxed. As they settled down to rest, the tension from earlier had eased. It wasn't trust, not yet, but there was a tentative understanding forming among them. Eli glanced at Lyrina as she leaned back against a log, her silver eyes reflecting the firelight. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected alliance wouldn't end in betrayal after all. But that was a worry for another day. For now, they had a fire, a plan, and the promise of another trial tomorrow. Chapter 4: The Challenge of the Mines. The second day of trials dawned with a crisp, golden light that filtered through the jungle canopy. Eli stretched and groaned as he rolled off his cot. He wasn't used to the alien fabric the beds were made of, too firm in some places, too soft in others. Andrew, as always, seemed unbothered, already up and fiddling with a small, sleek device he'd scavenged from their supply pack. "Morning sunshine," Andrew called. "Ready for today's fun?" "I doubt fun is the right word," Eli replied, rubbing his eyes. "What's on the docket?" Drent walked in before Andrew could answer, his heavy footfalls reverberating slightly in the small shelter. The Major's green eyes glowed faintly as he placed a small holographic sphere on the table. It lit up instantly, projecting a rotating map of their next trial zone. "The first trial tested your ability to survive in a hostile environment," Drent said, his voice calm but firm. "This one is different. Today you will face the challenge of the mind." "Care to be more specific?" Eli asked. "You will be taken to a neutral zone, devoid of physical danger," Drent explained. "There, you must solve a series of complex puzzles that will test your intelligence, teamwork, and strategic thinking." "Sounds better than running from carnivorous plants," Eli said, earning a laugh from Andrew. Lyrina entered the room next, her elegant armor still immaculate despite the wear and tear of the jungle. She carried a small device that resembled a glowing tablet, which she set down on the table next to the hologram. You will also have to decipher a series of ancient Zaltraxian texts. They contain clues that will guide you through the puzzles. Andrew leaned over the table, squinting at the shifting glyphs that appeared in the hologram. Great. Alien riddles. My favorite. Drent's mandibles clicked together, a sound Eli was starting to associate with annoyance. These are more than riddles. They are tests of comprehension and logic. Your ability to work together will be crucial. Eli exchanged a glance with Andrew. You good at puzzles? Not particularly, Andrew said with a grin. But I'm great at winging it. Fantastic, Eli muttered. Lyrena stepped closer to the hologram, her silver eyes scanning the glyphs. If we combine our strengths, we have a better chance of succeeding. Eli, Andrew, focus on the logic-based challenges. I'll handle the translations. Major Drent can assist with the more advanced calculations. Sounds like a plan, Eli said, grateful for Lyrena's clear-headed approach. When they arrived at the neutral zone, it was a stark contrast to the lush jungle they had just left. The area was a vast, open chamber made of smooth, metallic surfaces. In the center stood a massive, crystalline structure that pulsed with an otherworldly light. Scattered around the room were consoles, holographic displays, and strange mechanical devices that seemed to defy gravity. Looks complicated, Andrew said, scratching his head. Drent stepped forward, his gaze sharp. The crystal is the final objective. Solving the souls. Lyrena explained the meaning of certain symbols, and Drent used his vast knowledge of mathematics to calculate the correct input sequences. Andrew, to Eli's surprise, proved invaluable when it came to thinking outside the box. He suggested unconventional approaches that often led to breakthroughs. At one point, they encountered a particularly frustrating challenge. A spherical device that emitted a faint hum and displayed what looked like a three-dimensional maze. Eli frowned, turning the device in his hands. What are we supposed to do with this? It's a navigational puzzle, Drent said. You must find the correct path through the maze to unlock the next console. Andrew leaned over Eli's shoulder. Try rotating it this way. Maybe the path lines up if we think in 3 dimensions. Eli followed Andrew's suggestion, twisting the sphere until the glowing lines formed a coherent route. Got it, he said, as the device clicked and a nearby console lit up. Nicely done, Lyrena said, giving Andrew a nod. Eli felt a small swell of satisfaction. They were starting to function as a team, each person's skills complementing the others. Even Drent, who seemed to prefer working alone, began offering more direct guidance as the puzzles grew more complex. Hours passed as they solved challenge after challenge, the glowing crystal at the center of the chamber becoming more active with each success. At one point, Lyrena paused, her gaze lingering on Eli. You're quite adept at these logical puzzles, she said. Have you studied advanced problem-solving techniques on Earth? Not really, Eli admitted. But I guess I've always been good at spotting patterns. Probably comes from spending too much time fixing broken equipment back home. Lyrena smiled faintly. Whatever the source, it's proving useful. Andrew piped up. Maybe we should recruit you for the next alien engineering contest. You'd clean house. Eli shook his head, chuckling. Let's focus on this trial first. Finally, they reached the last console, which displayed a long string of Zaltraxian text. Lyrena translated it quickly, her fingers gliding over the symbols. We need to input the final sequence here, she said. Eli, Andrew, find the repeating pattern. Drent, prepare the calculations. Working together, they identified the correct sequence and input it into the console. The crystal in the center pulsed brighter and then released a burst of light that illuminated the entire chamber. We did it, Lyrena said, her voice calm but with a hint of satisfaction. Andrew grinned. No explosions, no man-eating plants. I'd call that a win. Eli exhaled, feeling the tension ease from his shoulders. They had passed the challenge of the mines, and for the first time he started to believe they might actually have a shot at making it through the trials intact. Chapter 5, The Midnight Conversations. The stars above Zaltrax's surface were a mesmerizing sight, especially when viewed from the observatory. Eli leaned against the smooth railing, gazing out at the brilliant constellations that filled the sky. The twin moons hung low on the horizon, casting a gentle glow over the landscape. Andrew walked up beside him, a cup of steaming liquid in his hand. "Some view, huh? It's incredible," Eli said, not looking away. "Makes you wonder how many other places like this are out there." Andrew took a sip and let out a satisfied sigh. "Plenty, I'd bet. Not all of them have trials like these, though. How are you holding up, mate?" Eli shrugged. "I'm managing. I'm still here, right? But I can't say I'm not exhausted." "Join the club," Andrew said with a chuckle. "I think we've all got bruises in places we didn't know could bruise. Still, you're doing all right. More than all right, actually." "Thanks," Eli said, glancing over at him. "What about you? You've been acting like this is just another walk in the park." "Let's just say I've had my share of tough situations," Andrew replied. "You learn to roll with it, and having decent teammates helps." Eli turned his attention back to the stars, the silence between them comfortable. After a few moments, the sound of soft footsteps broke the stillness. They turned to see Lyrina approaching, her silver eyes catching the moonlight. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her voice quiet but warm. "Not at all," Andrew said, taking another sip. "The more the merrier." Lyrina stepped up beside Eli, her gaze fixed on the same constellation he'd been admiring. "On Seriphus, we don't see stars like these. The atmosphere is thick with bioluminescent clouds. It's beautiful in its own way, but not like this." "You sound like you miss it," Eli said. "Of course," Lyrina replied. "But I also find joy in the unfamiliar. The chance to experience something entirely new is rare." Andrew tapped the side of his cup. "I'll drink to that." Eli glanced over at Lyrina, noticing the faint smile that played on her lips as she watched the stars. "So what brought you here? You seem like you could have chosen a different path." Lyrina tilted her head slightly, as if considering how much to share. "I was chosen, much like you. The Seriphus Dominion believes in representation, and I was trained to uphold our ideals in any arena. When the Queen's challenge was announced, it wasn't a request. It was a duty." "Sounds intense," Eli said. "But you seem to be handling it well." Lyrina gave a small laugh. "Appearances can be deceiving. I have had my moments of doubt just as anyone would. But I believe in the value of this challenge. It is not only a test of strength but of character." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Well, I can say this much. I don't think they expected a human like Eli to be doing as well as he is. He's been surprising all of us." Eli waved a hand. "You're overselling it. I'm just trying not to trip over my own feet." "Modesty is admirable, but it doesn't change the truth," Lyrina said, her tone more serious now. "You have a unique way of thinking, Eli. That alone sets you apart." For a moment, the three of them stood in comfortable silence, letting the beauty of the night settle around them. Then, Lyrina turned slightly toward Eli, her expression softening. "You have done more than hold your own, Eli. You have proven adaptable, resourceful, and dependable. These are qualities that matter, not just in a trial but in life." Eli blinked, caught off guard by her words. "Thanks, Lyrina. That means a lot." Andrew grinned and took another sip. "And here I thought I was the smooth talker in this group." Lyrina gave him a sideways glance, amusement flickering in her silver eyes. "You have your charms, Andrew." Eli chuckled, shaking his head. "You're all too much." As the night deepened, their conversation turned more casual, filled with shared stories and bits of humor. Andrew recounted a particularly ridiculous mission he'd been on, earning genuine laughter from both Eli and Lyrina. Even Drent, who remained near the back of the observatory, seemed to listen quietly, his usual stern demeanor slightly softened by the camaraderie forming among them. Eventually, Lyrina reached out, brushing her hand lightly against Eli's arm as she spoke. It was a small, instinctive gesture, but it lingered for just a moment longer than he expected. Their eyes met, and Eli saw something in her gaze. An understanding, a connection that went beyond the trial they were in. He didn't pull away, and neither did she. Instead, they both let the moment settle, unspoken but understood. Andrew, sensing the shift, gave a subtle grin and stepped back toward Drent, leaving Eli and Lyrina at the railing. "You know," Eli said after a while, his voice quieter now, "I didn't think I'd find myself talking about life with an alien princess under 2 moons. Lyrina smiled. "And yet, here we are." The stars above continued their slow dance across the sky, and the 4 of them, human and alien alike, found an unexpected solace in each other's company. Chapter 6. The Gauntlet. The 3rd trial, known only as the Gauntlet, loomed before them like a monolithic challenge. The entire team, Eli, Andrew, Lyrina, and Drent, stood at the base of a massive stone archway carved with intricate alien symbols. Beyond it stretched a labyrinth of dense jungle, ancient ruins, and treacherous terrain that promised not just difficulty, but the kind of exhaustion that tested willpower as much as physical strength. "Right, so," Andrew began, hands on his hips as he squinted into the gloom. "I'm guessing this is where things get interesting." "Interesting is one word for it," Lyrina said, her sharp gaze scanning the carved glyphs. "This trial is designed to break us down, force us to confront our limits. Physical, mental, and emotional." "Sounds like fun," Eli muttered, tugging at the strap of his gear. "How long do we have to get through it?" Drent stepped forward, his towering presence as commanding as ever. "The time limit is not strictly defined. Progress is monitored by checkpoints. We must reach the central clearing before the sun sets, or we risk disqualification." Andrew looked up at the sky, which was already growing darker under the thick canopy. "All right then, no time like the present." They moved as a unit into the labyrinth, the air growing heavier and more humid the deeper they went. The first obstacle presented itself as a wide chasm, crossed only by a series of stone pillars spaced just far enough apart to make a jump dangerous. One slip, and the sheer drop below would take care of the rest. Lyrina crouched by the edge, assessing the distance. "If we take it one at a time, we'll reduce the risk." "Eli, you go first." "Why me?" Eli asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. "You're the best at improvisation," she replied simply. "If something goes wrong, you'll think of a way to fix it." Andrew laughed. "Great logic. Don't look down, mate." Taking a deep breath, Eli backed up a few steps and then sprinted forward, leaping to the first pillar. He landed with a solid thud, arms flailing for balance. "Made it!" he called back. One by one, the others followed. Andrew barely made his second jump, catching the edge of the stone and hauling himself up with a grunt. Lyrina moved gracefully, her agility apparent in every step. Drent, with his natural strength and height, made the leaps look effortless. "Not so bad," Andrew said, brushing dust off his pants. "What's next?" What came next were walls covered in thick, thorny vines, with no clear way around. They tried hacking through them with blades, but the vines quickly grew back, their regenerative properties almost mocking their efforts. Lyrina frowned. "These are Zaltraxian coil vines. They heal rapidly when damaged. The only way to pass is to disarm their growth response." "And how do we do that?" Eli asked. She examined the base of the vines, then pointed to a faint, glowing bulb hidden among them. "There, that's their core. If we apply pressure in the right place, it will suppress the regrowth long enough to clear a path." Andrew grinned. "So, who gets the fun job of poking the alien plant?" Drent stepped forward. "I will handle this. Cover me." As the Major approached the vines, Andrew and Eli kept their weapons ready, watching the surrounding jungle for movement. Lyrina stayed close, guiding Drent with precise instructions. When he pressed the glowing bulb, the vines retracted in an instant, leaving a narrow passage clear. "Nicely done," Eli said. "Guess it's all about knowing where to push." They continued on, climbing steep rock faces, navigating slippery riverbeds, and facing down creatures that prowled the shadows. At one point, a large, scaled predator with razor-sharp teeth appeared, blocking their path. Drent moved forward instinctively, drawing the creature's attention. while Eli and Andrew worked together to flank it. With a quick, coordinated effort, they forced the beast to retreat into the underbrush. "Teamwork," Andrew said, brushing dirt off his hands. "Who knew we'd get so good at it?" Eli gave a faint smile. "It's growing on me." As they neared the central clearing, the terrain grew more unforgiving. The final stretch was a steep, rocky incline covered in loose stones that threatened to send them sliding back down with every step. Lyrena was the first to spot a series of ancient handholds carved into the rock face. "These carvings are old but stable," she said. "If we follow them, we can make it up without risking a fall." Eli tested the first handhold. It held firm, and he began climbing, guiding the others as they ascended. Andrew muttered complaints about the incline, but kept climbing. Drent, as always, moved steadily, while Lyrena climbed with quiet efficiency. When they finally reached the top, the central clearing spread out before them, bathed in the warm light of the setting sun. They stood together for a moment, catching their breath and surveying the view. "We made it," Eli said. "Barely?" Andrew added, wiping sweat from his brow. Drent nodded. "A successful run. The Queen will take note." Lyrena turned to Eli, her silver eyes catching the last rays of sunlight. "Your adaptability served us well. We worked as one." Eli felt a flicker of pride at her words, but he just nodded. "Yeah, we did." As the sun dipped below the horizon, their group prepared to leave the clearing. Another trial completed, and another step closer to whatever lay at the end of this journey. Chapter 7: The Decision. As dawn broke, the group found themselves standing in the shadow of the royal palace. The towering spires of Zoltrax's capital gleamed under the light of twin suns, their crystal-like surfaces refracting light in a dazzling display. It was a striking contrast to the trials they had endured, peaceful, almost serene. Eli felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This wasn't just another trial. It was the culmination of everything they had been working toward. "So, this is it, huh?" Andrew said, standing beside him. "All that running, climbing, and nearly getting eaten comes down to one meeting with the Queen." "Feels surreal," Eli admitted. "I mean, we survived all of that, and now we just stand here?" Drent, as always, cut straight to the point. "The Queen does not choose lightly. You have proven yourselves worthy competitors. But this final moment is about more than physical strength or cunning. It is about character, about what you represent." "Great," Andrew said. "No pressure at all." Eli turned to Lyrena, who had been quiet since they arrived. Her silver eyes, so often sharp and focused, now seemed distant. "You okay?" he asked. Lyrena blinked, pulling herself from her thoughts. "Yes, I'm fine. It's just, this is a significant moment for all of us. We have each contributed something unique. Whatever the Queen's decision, we have accomplished much." "Sure," Andrew said. "But it'd be nice to win, yeah?" Lyrena offered him a small smile. "Victory is one thing. What we do with it is another." "Deep," Andrew said. "You're really going for the inspirational angle, aren't you?" Eli chuckled, but the weight of the impending audience with Queen Seraphina kept his nerves on edge. He found himself pacing, trying to burn off the restless energy. The trials had been grueling, sure, but at least then he was moving, doing something. Standing still and waiting was worse. His thoughts kept circling back to the question, what if I'm not good enough? Drent stepped forward, his authoritative presence drawing their attention. "It is time." They were led into the grand hall, its high ceilings adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer as they moved. At the far end of the chamber sat Queen Seraphina on a throne that appeared to be made of living crystal. Her regal form radiated authority, her long, flowing gown reflecting the same iridescent light as the palace itself. Eli's heart pounded as they approached. He could feel Andrew's nervous energy beside him, and even Lyrena's usual calm seemed slightly shaken. Drent, of course, looked as composed as ever. The Queen's voice echoed through the hall, both commanding and oddly soothing. "You have all faced the trials with strength and determination. Each of you has demonstrated qualities that make you worthy of consideration. But now I must choose. Eli felt his throat tighten. This was it. The moment that would determine not only the outcome of their efforts, but also their place in the galaxy's future. He glanced at Andrew, who gave him a faint, encouraging grin, and at Lyrina, who simply nodded. Drent stood tall, his unreadable expression fixed on the Queen. Queen Seraphina rose gracefully from her throne, descending the steps with an elegance that seemed almost otherworldly. She stopped in front of them, her piercing gaze sweeping over the group. You have all proven your mettle, but what I value most is the bond you have formed. A protector is not merely a warrior. They must embody unity, trust, and understanding. Eli's breath caught. Could it be possible that the trials weren't just about physical challenges or strategic puzzles? That they had been about building something more intangible? The Queen turned to him, her crystalline eyes seeming to look straight into his soul. Eli James, you have shown a rare quality. A willingness to adapt, to learn, and to grow alongside others. You are a leader not because of strength alone, but because of your ability to inspire those around you. I offer you a place at my side as protector of the realm. Eli felt a rush of emotion. Relief, pride, disbelief. Thank you, Your Majesty, he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind inside him. Andrew clapped him on the back, his grin wide. What did I tell you, mate? You had it in you all along. Lyrina gave Eli a soft smile. Congratulations, Eli. You earned this. Drent's mandibles clicked together, a sound Eli had come to interpret as approval. The Queen has chosen well. As the Queen returned to her throne, Eli couldn't help but glance back at his team. Andrew's unfailing humor, Lyrina's grace and wisdom, Drent's unwavering strength. The trials may have been over, but their journey as a team was just beginning. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. Eli stood at the balcony of the royal chambers, gazing out at the bustling city below. The trials were over, the crown's decision made, and now the true weight of his role began to settle on his shoulders. Though the title of protector sounded grand, Eli knew it came with responsibilities that extended far beyond combat. You're up early. Eli turned to see Andrew, casually leaning against the ornate doorway, holding 2 steaming cups. Couldn't sleep, Eli admitted, taking one of the offered cups. The aroma was earthy and unfamiliar, but pleasant. Andrew grinned. Well, I'm not one for titles and formality, but you've earned it. You'll do fine. Easy for you to say, Eli replied. You're not the one standing in front of alien dignitaries tomorrow trying to explain human customs. Andrew laughed. True, but you've got that whole charm under pressure thing going for you. And hey, if they don't get your jokes, just blame the translator. Eli smirked. That's your plan, isn't it? Every time, Andrew said with a wink. Their banter was interrupted by the sound of soft, measured footsteps. Lyrina stepped into view, her silver eyes catching the light of the morning sun. Good morning, she said, her voice calm and steady. I trust you're preparing for today's introduction to the Royal Council? Eli sighed. As prepared as I can be. I just hope. From the trials. Andrew snorted. Except this time, the puzzle pieces are grumpy ambassadors and convoluted protocols. Lyrina shot Andrew a mildly amused look before turning back to Eli. The key is patience. Speak honestly, show respect, and they'll listen. I'll keep that in mind, Eli said. Thanks, Lyrina. Andrew raised his cup. Here's to keeping your head above water, mate. The 3 of them stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the city's hum serving as a backdrop. Though the trials were over, the bond they had formed remained. Eli couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for their support, especially as the reality of his new position began to sink in. Later that day, Eli found himself in the Grand Council chamber. The room was a mosaic of cultures and traditions, with ambassadors and representatives from numerous star systems seated at a massive circular table. Queen Seraphina presided over the assembly, her regal presence commanding attention. When Eli was introduced, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to him, a human standing in a position few could have predicted. He took a deep breath and began to speak, recounting the journey that had brought him here, emphasizing the importance of cooperation and mutual understanding. The council members listened intently, their expressions ranging from curiosity to cautious approval. As he spoke, Eli noticed subtle nods from a few representatives, while others exchanged quiet words. By the time he finished, the room erupted into a mixture of applause and polite murmurs. "Well done," Lyrena whispered as Eli returned to his seat. Andrew gave him a thumbs up from across the room, his grin as wide as ever. Drent, though characteristically reserved, inclined his head slightly, a gesture Eli had come to interpret as a sign of respect. After the council meeting, Eli joined Andrew and Lyrena in one of the palace's gardens. The air was fresh, the scent of alien flowers blending with the faint hum of distant energy fields. "Not bad for your first day," Andrew said, clapping Eli on the shoulder. "Could have been worse," Eli replied. "At least I didn't trip over my own feet." Lyrena's eyes sparkled with amusement. "You handled yourself well. The council respects sincerity, and you gave them that." Eli gave a small smile. "Thanks, both of you. I couldn't have done it without you." "Of course," Andrew said. "We're a team. You didn't think we'd leave you to deal with all this alone, did you?" Eli's smile widened. "No, I guess not. And I'm glad you're here." As the sun set over Zoltrax, the three of them sat in the garden, sharing stories and laughing about the trials they had faced. Though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. They had come through the challenges together, and together they would navigate whatever lay ahead.